All right, green flags. Number one, they're transparent about the money. If they are transparent to you about the rate that they charge the client and the rate that they charge to you, or they have a pricing sheet and that notes what margin they take. And if they are disclosing dollars to you and being transparent about their business model, that is a big green flag. There was a question I read a couple of weeks ago, and it was for a fractional executive role. And typically, just to give some context, fractional executive roles tend to be 1 to 3 days a week max, whereas a consulting project might be a contracted amount of, like, it's a deliverable, typically not amount of time. So they often are more apt to price in hours or days than we are. And this person was asking, is this the company she was considering had a rate card, and that rate card noted what percentage was then the company would retain based on the billing per month, the revenue that the consultant would make. And it graduated down. So the rates started at, let's call it 20% of gross billed revenue, and they graduated down as the gross billed revenue would go up. They graduated that down to 10%. And the person asking the question had a lot of frustration and consternation about how could they deserve 10%. And what was interesting to me was that the maximum revenue where they capped out at 10% was like $10,000 a month. Literally, that's nothing. Okay. So, like, you got to understand, like, in our business staff, my consultants, best consultant rates are somewhere between 2 and 3,200 a day. So 10, and just to be transparent, like, the house takes 25% here. That's how it works. And there's a lot of reasons why, but the house takes 25%, and you're going to know what we build the client. You're going to know what your rate is. And then we have a revenue, like, if there's additional project work that's generated for another person, like, there's a referral bonus or rev share with the consultant back. So you could ostensibly, like, claw back 15%. But 10% is really good. So yeah, I think the fact, though, that struck me was, like, they're willing to share that with you up front. I think that is a strong, strong green flag. Okay. Next green flag. They have real human client relationships. Again, when they have, let's look at this Catalent example. It's a marketplace. They have a website, very slick. I would not be confident that the person within Catalent is advocating for me and advocating and is truly able to position me and my skills. What they're trying to position is multiple people who each bring certain things so that they can close a deal, right? So they're able to leverage each of you off of each other in a way where someone who has a real human to human relationship isn't leveraging people off of people. We almost always, with a new client, do give 2 options for a consultant that we recommend. However, I rule never give similar options. I give 2 people that are bringing 2 very different things. And my goal is so that the client can choose between the 2 and get the match that they believe has the most value. So I'm not playing people off of each other. I'm purposefully helping the client come to a decision about who the right person is to solve their problem. And that's because I have a human relationship with people. And I think there's some other firms that do as well. And I think some of these small private equity firms can actually be really interesting because they're probably buying legacy, like small players like us. And we're bringing real human relationships to the table to find a solution, not to drive a negotiation. So look for the people to people connection. Along those lines too, I mean, I feel like this kind of goes without saying, but make sure you're being treated like a professional. Sometimes in these marketplaces, they're putting pretty junior people on their, and they see it as a sales role. And, like, it's not really giving your professional experience the full value it deserves. So I would just be cautious of that. Also, green flag, they have a really clear contract. Contracts, there may be a lot of pages and maybe some things like indemnification or work product that may be new to you, but typically it's going to have some sort of a very clear non-compete. I think a non-compete is perfectly acceptable to have as long as it's well defined and pretty clear and fair IP clauses. But if it doesn't look sketchy, probably not. So clear contracts. And then here's one that if you are able to ask another consultant, I would get some history here is, are they able to pay on time? So maybe there's 2 ways you could do this. First way is obviously it'd be best to ask someone that's worked with them, do they pay and deliver that payment to the agreement that you expected? But in the absence of that, I think you want to have very clear conversations with them about how they are paid and how you are paid and when that happens. To some extent, each client contract is at the mercy of the actual client, and you can't dictate your terms. I mean, you can't expect this. If the company is being paid at a certain time, like you should be paid following that in a reasonable number of days. But, you know, to some extent, that number of days is dictated by the hiring company's terms with the client. Sometimes they can't escape a net 45. But what you're looking for is, are they being paid up front and you're not? Or are they being paid net 15 and you're on net 60? That doesn't really seem like a great way to do business with someone in an honest way. Yeah, I would give people a little bit of trust here. I'll just tell you, like, our contracts are so, like, after we get paid, we pay you them the 15th, the following of the next month. That's just because we have ongoing client relationships where we regularly are paid on the 8th. So we get paid on the 8th, you get paid on the 15th. That gives us a little bit of buffer to do the calculation and make sure the transfer goes through. So if, you know, whereas the terms may say net 60, that's because our client terms are net 60. We're not trying. I'm happy to have that. Like, my point is, I'm happy to have that transparent conversation with a consultant. Someone's not willing to have a transparent conversation about it, I do think it's a red flag. So green flag, talk about the money.